What kind of music is played on a Virgin Voyages ship? What's the new restaurant Lucky Lotus all about? And lastly, is it possible to stay on a diet while on a cruise? I'm going to answer all of these and a bunch of other things from our latest sailing on the Scarlett Lady. I'm Edwin Balloy, and I run a lifestyle and real estate blog. I'd like to share a lot of adventures that my wife and I like doing because we like a lot of travel and taking up the local sites as a resident of Orange County, California. Now, I have to admit that when I go online and I see all the questions regarding Virgin Voyages, I have to get into some of the misperceptions and what are some of the more accurate things. First and foremost, it's always about perspective. People wonder, is a Virgin Voyages cruise too wild? And I always have to come back to or ask them, where are you coming from and do you go out all the time? Because that'll definitely affect your perspective and your experience on the Virgin Voyages ship. For my wife and I, we go to Las Vegas a few times a year. We live in Southern California. We like to pretend that we're a lot younger than we really are, even though that we're empty nesters. There's a lot of people who think we're just at clubs and on cruises like 24/7. Now, the reality is somewhere in between. We probably go out to the clubs maybe 3-4 times a year. I know that's still a lot for people around our age. But then cruises, we take 1 to 2 a year, but then we post about it an awful lot. So I wanted to share the experience from our second time on the Virgin Voyages ship. The first cruise was in 2024 on the Valiant Lady. And then so we went on the Scarlett Lady this time around. And I have to answer that question. Are the Virgin Voyages ships really wild? From our perspective and the background that we've given you, even when we go down to places like the Gaslamp District and the places that we have right in our backyard, I would say that it's actually pretty tame. It's tame from the crowd perspective. It's a pretty mellow, late or actually early retiring crowd, where there's not too many people that are around the bars even after midnight. At least that's our perspective from our 2 sailings. And then the music tells an awful lot about just how big of a party crowd Virgin really is. So if you talk to any of your DJ friends, I'm not a DJ myself, but then you ask anyone, and if they were to classify the different genres and the different scenes of each and every club, this is probably what they would call open format. Open format's a term that I use very loosely, and they would too, because it's just supposed to cover all genres, where you're supposed to play multiple types of songs and then just see where the sweet spot is. You look for the crowd response, and then let's say you're going from hip hop, R&B, 90s hip hop, today's hip hop, and then EDM, and then you find a sweet spot, let's say over in EDM, and you see more response from the crowd. You're going to tend to stay there, and then sometimes even do some little subtle things that the crowd doesn't notice by turning up the music during that time. Sometimes you'll go faster beats for a minute and then just make the energy go higher and higher. So that's my experience that I've seen from the clubs that we've been to. And we're not even talking about like the mega clubs or anything like that. I'm talking about just your run-of-the-mill, mainstream, open format type of clubs that you would call it, where it's not just one specific crowd. You have a DJ that's trying to feel out the crowd and trying to pick out the sweet spot and stay where that is. What we found out is that after talking to a couple of the DJs on some of these ships is that they're asked to essentially play a playlist. That's why you hear a lot of repetition, especially on the Royal Caribbean ships. It almost sounds like you're hearing the same 5 songs like the whole time, because they're trying to come up with an all-time top 40. On the Virgin Voyages ship, you'll notice that from the 2 pajama parties that we've been to, I don't know how to describe that genre, but then think about Taylor Swift, Britney Spears, even some Justin Timberlake. So a little of that teeny bopper pop kind of music. I don't know, there must be a name for that kind of vibe, but it's one of those where they're just keeping it kind of just really down here. They're not going to really crank it up. And then we talked to a few of the other guests. It wasn't just us, because I try to keep some of my negativity to myself, because especially if people having fun on the cruise. I'm not going to talk about how I don't like the music or anything like that. I'll try to play up and I'll try to come up to their energy. But we did talk to some of the other couples, and we looked for the response, and we see people shaking our heads, see them shaking their heads, because I know some of them want the DJ to really crank it up a little more. But when they're just sticking to that Taylor Swift kind of stuff, it's really tough to really just come out and make it worth your outfits that you have for pajama night or anything like that. So that's what we noticed for pajama night. Let me know down below in the comments if there's a specific name for that kind of genre that's played that I described. You know, I'm calling it teen pop. So if you can imagine, it's tough to really think you're going hard to any of that kind of music. But then anywhere else on board, I noticed that the DJs, they get a lot more freedom over in the manor room. Of course, that's on the non-theme night, because they also had the 80s night. They obviously have to stick within the 80s genre. But when you go to Bimini Beach, I noticed they could go a little harder. But then whether you like hip hop, 90s hip hop, or even EDM, they're not going to go off the deep end and really just stay there and start cranking it up like what we're used to. So if you're someone who's really picking on your music, just kind of try to lower your expectation, because there's still plenty of fun to be had, because you have to keep in mind, you're the cruise director or you're doing cruise programming where you're trying to cater towards 3,500 people on board, and on these Royal Caribbean ships, 6,000 people on board, and you're trying to play the best music for them. You're going to end up with a lot of repetition and a lot of people wanting to hear some of that all-time top 40 with like Journey or Neil Diamond. You're going to hear a lot of that kind of repetition. So yeah, it is what it is. Well, what I hope, especially for a pajama party, that the DJs get a little more leeway and they're able to go off on the deep end. If the crowd's really feeling it and you're seeing a lot of energy, let the DJ just stay there and let them crank it up. And when I say tame, that's a good thing, actually, because we've been to Vegas and to some of the hotels where it's just going off the hook, and it's a bit extreme for us, because the last place where I want partying going on is near the staterooms. The stateroom is a place where I just want it quiet. I want the environment to be controlled there, and I want to get my sleep. We've been to Vegas a few times where the neighbors around us are just bringing these big speaker boxes. You could hear the bass going through your wall. Not to say that won't happen on a cruise, but then, knock on wood, but on Virgin Voyages ships, all of our neighbors have been great. We never hear anything, even in the balcony areas. Sharp contrast to a few times when we'd go to Vegas and the stateroom next to us is smoking weed and the weed's coming through from underneath the adjoining door. Yeah, that could be a bit much. So that's a good thing when I say tame, because they tend to keep the partying in the common areas. Staterooms have been quiet, so we've been lucky so far. The other thing that was different about this cruise was it was right around March, so that was the time there were a few spring breakers on the cruise. Christine Lozada, check out her channel definitely, and check out what she has to say about the spring break crowd. I had talked and we were texting back and forth about our experience, because our sailings were just a week apart, asking each other if there were spring breakers on each cruise. And almost immediately when we went through the check-in lines, by the way, which was a breeze, because my other blog talked about the sharp contrast between Royal Caribbean and Virgin Voyages, that the Virgin ships, that the lines just seemed to really bottleneck because there was only one metal detector. But this time around, there were actually, I think, 3 or maybe even 4 metal detectors. So that just means the line just keeps moving, and the line just moves as fast as you can walk. And before you know it, we're already over at the main room, or at the at the main staircase, and then the music going on, and they're giving us high fives. So kudos to them for either fixing what happened back in our 2024 sailing, or if they just improved in general. We thought it was great, because we're not rock stars. We didn't ask for priority boarding or anything like that. We just went in with everyone, and we had a 2:30 check-in, and we just kept going. So we noticed when we're in line, and also when we were in our Facebook group, that there were going to be a number of spring breakers. So I think I counted about 50, which means several groups of them. So it was actually an improvement of the vibe, because of the whole point of a lot of this, a lot of people want to definitely feel younger. That's kind of like the never-ending quest of Americans, or probably basically everyone in the world in general. But then, yeah, they definitely kept the vibe, I thought, better because of it. It had a much more youthful vibe. You have a lot of them over in the bar areas and all that. But then I have to admit that out of all the places, there wasn't any area where the spring breakers dominated. And again, that's probably not a bad thing. But then whether I'm talking about the pools, the manor house over in, and also on the rocks. So those places, you can notice the spring break crowd being there, but then not overbearing or anything like that. It still felt like a very Virgin Voyages vibe, whatever that means, for my 2 cruises. We also met a couple of students from, University of Wisconsin, who happened to be agricultural students, because we took an excursion and happened to share the bus ride with them. Fantastic kids, and happened to be the same age as our college kid. So that was nice. And then it's always funny hearing how they order their drinks, because if you remember back in college, you're doing shots of Jose Cuervo, and you're mixing an awful lot, and hearing them order Bud Light still when there's premium beers on board. We got a good chuckle at that, and even gave some advice on what to actually order when you're in that kind of environment. So the spring break crowd really didn't change it much. If it did change it, it changed it for the better, because the last time we cruised, it was right up against Thanksgiving weekend. So we didn't have any really singles on board. We didn't really have a lot of the just a younger crowd in general. No big birthday parties, no bachelorette parties, no nothing like that. But it was still a good time. Now, let's talk about something that the fitness junkies definitely think about planning for a cruise. As someone who's been into bodybuilding forever, at least 20 years, if I were to think about all the cruise ships or the cruise lines I've been on, Disney, Royal Caribbean, and Virgin, if I'm picking up one where I could stay and stick to my diet, it's going to be Virgin Voyages. Yes, I'm sure on any of those cruises, you could stick to your diet by just ordering stuff, and you could be on a paleo diet, you could be on low cal, you could be on vegetarian. Their menus are very flexible, but I have to say the Virgin ships are probably the best for anybody who wants to stay with lean meats, low calorie, and then moderate carbohydrates. So I went into this cruise, which was a 6-day sailing, with the goal of just maintaining. So that still is a diet, just maintaining, because I'm not going to just let myself go off the rails and come back 10 pounds heavier. So I was really strict about, especially that very first day on board. We had breakfast over at our hotel, which was the free kind. So it's as good as you could get with the free kind of breakfast. So that was our first meal. And then we had our second meal. Well, after we checked in, we went straight to the dock house. For those of you who have been to the dock house, you know that this is a place for great lean choices of protein. So we ordered the skewers, which had shrimp, we had chicken, and also the flat iron steak. Those 2 meals, I'm already think that I'm on track, and I could kind of just stick to my diet. Then over for dinner, we went over to Pink Agave, and then that one I knew I ate pretty clean during the day, so I felt I had room for at least 1,000, if not 1,400 calories. So that was our next meal. And then we ended up the night, and this is how I ended up each night, over at the galley. At the galley, we happened to have an egg white omelet. So you put all those things together, I'm right at my goal of 3,000 calories. 3,000 calories is my maintenance calories, and I felt, heck, I could do this the whole time, because 3,000 calories means that I could have a pretty sensible dinner. And then let's see where everything lies, because I also plan on hitting the gym a few times. So let's check off that. 3,000 calories or under, checking off all the times that I went to the gym, went to the cardio sessions. So it sounded like I was just on track for another cruise where I didn't gain a ton of weight. Wrong. What ended up happening is I was right around day 3, and keep in mind, I know a lot of people nitpick at this and say, no, it's just all water weight and you didn't really gain any fat. But by day 3, I'm getting ready for the pool, and I look at myself in the mirror, and I could instantly see like a nice pot belly dad bod coming into full effect. So I know at that point I'm a little angry at myself. I'm thinking, okay, it's inflammation. Maybe getting my water under control will control that. But by the way, what we do, because you get the 2 bottles of water in your stateroom, immediately when we saw our stateroom attendant, we introduced ourselves, and then they're always nice, and they ask us, do you have any special requests? My first one is, oh, I need distilled water because I'm on a CPAP machine. Yeah, believe it or not, I have sleep apnea. So they accommodate me great by giving me distilled water. And I said, request number 2 is, instead of 2 bottles, can you bring us 3 bottles? And we just want them still, not non-soda water. We just want still water. So make sure, especially if you're a fitness guy fitness guy or gal, trying to get in your 8 glasses of water or your 1.5 gallon water, whatever you're trying to do, your stateroom will accommodate you, because the last thing you want to do is come back after a night of partying and then you come back to an empty bottle of water. So we made sure that we always had water in our stateroom. Sharp contrast to Royal Caribbean. That's a blog for another day, because we didn't buy the soda package or the drink package. So we're sitting there with our little water bottle that we brought in the stateroom, and we're just parched like 24/7. Not a good experience. So remember to always ask for your water. If you have sleep apnea, ask for the distilled water. They'll take you up on both of those. So it wasn't my water that was out of imbalance, because that'll happen too if your water intake is crap. Well, you're probably guessing where I'm headed with this. I jump on the scale and I immediately see that I gained 4 pounds. That was on me sticking to the 3,000 calories a day, drinking my water, and also going to the gym. So what happened? I wasn't counting the alcohol calories. Alcohol calories, I only drink really martinis and wine, because those are the 2 lowest kind of calories, hard liquor and wines. 150 calories per glass for wine, and for martinis are under 100 calories. But then you imagine if you go on a bender and you go on a binge night drinking, which I've been known to do, you're at 1,000 calories. You're at 1,000 calories just from the alcohol. So that puts me at 4,000 calories. So that each day I'm above my calorie allotment by at least 1,000, if not 1,200 or 1,300. Because those fitness apps, they're not always accurate, and you don't know how much oil is actually going into some of this food. So by day 3, it should have been no surprise that I gained a lot of weight. But then I tried to make up for it by going to the gym more. So I started running more by day 3 after I saw I gained weight. I started doing longer workouts. Really bad formula, by the way, because you're up late at night, and some of the excursions, we're setting our alarm, and so we're sleep deprived, and I'm sitting there trying to out-train my diet. Not a good formula. So by the time we got back home, I was sick. I had a fever. I don't forget what temperature it was, but then it's not a good formula. So don't do that. If you find yourself getting off the rails, you can make minor tweaks here and there. Just enjoy yourself and have a good time. Lucky Lotus is now a new restaurant from Razzle Dazzle. Razzle Dazzle is transformed over to a Chinese kind of themed restaurant, or Asian fusion, whatever you want to call it. So we decided to try that out for one of our reservations. Our experience with Lucky Lotus, we ordered some of the things that you're used to seeing over at like Panda Express. We had banh mi, which are the pork buns inside a steamed bread. So we ordered that. We also ordered the shrimp. I ordered the chicken. But then I have to admit, as Filipinos, being around Southern California, where we just get a ton of Asian food offerings, I have to rate it at about 5.5 out of 10. It wasn't awful. It was still a good meal, but then at the same time, would we go look forward to going back? Probably not. But it is what it is. I still like it better than Razzle Dazzle. Razzle Dazzle was my least favorite restaurant. Not necessarily because it was vegetarian, but then it could have just been bad luck. Again, sample size of 1, probably not good enough. But we had slow service, where our mimosas were never refilled. So it could have just been bad luck, but we still weren't looking forward to going razzle. Kind of the same thing with Gunby. It was an experience worth going just because of the drinking games and all the hype behind it. But then, being in Southern California, we're spoiled just being around a lot of real Korean barbecue. And then we just have to look at it and say, hey, that's cute. They have that stuff on board, and they mostly give you a bunch of starches first before bringing out the actual barbecue. So it's something we'd probably do again if another couple asked us if we wanted to have dinner with them, but then on our own, we'd still rather just go to Test Kitchen, The Wake, or of course, Pink Agave. Lastly, one of our ports was canceled, so we ended up rerouting and going over to the island of Belize, which I hear was the very first time a Virgin ship was there. We didn't book an itinerary there because we didn't feel like being like the guinea pigs and not having any kind of Virgin Voyages sanctioned itineraries out there. But we decided to just stay at the port. The port area is pretty small. We didn't know there was going to be a pool. So if you're going to Belize, just know that there is a pool in the port area. Bring your trunks because it's free to use. There was a DJ playing there. We decided to go hang out with another couple that we befriended. Shout out to Christina and Bobby because we ended up hanging out with them and some others on the ship multiple nights. So we ended up hanging out with them and going over to what is called the Wet Lizard, which is a two-story bar with an upstairs patio. We stayed in the upstairs balcony area, and it actually wasn't a tourist trap. It didn't have the Senior Frogs kind of pricing. I think I got like a $3 local beer, which was great. Our food wasn't much. Our overall tab, I think, barely scratched $100. So it's for 4 people and ordering alcohol and a couple entrees. I think that's pretty good. We got to write our names up on the wall. So if you go to the Wet Lizard, definitely go check out the wall and look for Edwin and Jen. We should be somewhere on there. We went down there and went and took up a few of the other sites in the port. It was one of the smaller ports, but then we did get to make a morning out of it and then go back to what we like to do sometimes on port days is go back to the pool and enjoy the pool because that's the least crowded pool day. So I'm going to be covering more from this cruise because there's an awful lot to unpack, but then just wanted to share these 3 questions with you. Again, I'm Edwin Balloy. Definitely subscribe to my channel and like this video.
Beside my doorstep, singing sweet song, a melody beyond.